I let my divorced friends convince me that marriage was a prison, and I destroyed the man who loved me when I secretly met a younger guy, and my husband exposed everything with one phone call. I'm Irina. I'm 32, and I want to tell you something that still hurts to admit. A few months ago, I ended my marriage to Marcel, my husband of 5 years and the man I shared a whole decade of my life with. It wasn't a violent or scandalous separation, but one full of impulsive decisions, pride, and bad advice. And the worst part is, if I look back, it all started with a simple afternoon with friends. I met Marcel when I was 22. I was in college, and he worked at a marketing agency. We were introduced at a mutual friend's party. From the first moment, I felt something different. It wasn't a superficial attraction, it was more like a sense of calm. He was kind, attentive, and had that quiet way of looking at people that made you feel heard. During the first few months, we went out almost every weekend. We went to cafes, walked in the park, or stayed talking for hours in his car listening to music. After 6 months together, I already knew he was the man I wanted to marry. I didn't say it out loud, but I felt it. I come from a pretty conservative family. My parents were of the idea that a woman should wait for the right moment for everything. They didn't let me have a boyfriend when I was a teenager. And every time a guy showed interest in me, my father analyzed him as if he were a suspect. He never liked anyone, but with Marcel it was different. My father was a Dodgers fan just like Marcel. That simple detail was the beginning of a relationship I never imagined would turn out so good. Marcel invited him to watch games. They talked about stats, players, and how baseball wasn't like it used to be. Soon, my father started inviting him to family barbecues and Sunday gatherings. My mother, though more reserved, also grew fond of him. She said he was a polite, responsible, and hardworking man. In a short time, Marcel was practically part of the family. I felt happy, secure, and thought that finally life was smiling at me. After 3 years of dating, Marcel proposed to me. He did it at Disneyland during a trip we'd planned months before. We were in front of the castle at night with fireworks lighting up the sky. When he knelt down, I was speechless. I accepted crying, and I remember at that moment thinking, this is the kind of love I want for life. The first years of marriage were perfect. We had a beautiful wedding with family and our closest friends. We lived in a small but cozy apartment. We cooked together, watched movies on weekends, and made plans for the future. Trips, the house, maybe kids. Not everything was ideal, of course, but arguments were minimal, and we always found a way to reconcile. During that time, several of my friends also got married. We were a group of 5, me, Sophia, Leah, Lonnie, and Nora. We'd known each other since college and had been through many stages together. We all got married within a few years of each other, and for a while our conversations revolved around weddings, honeymoons, and new couple routines. But over time, everything changed. By my 3rd year of marriage, 2 of my friends, Leah and Lonnie, got divorced. The process was hard to watch. Both were devastated at first, but after a few months they started looking different. More confident, more relaxed, almost happy. I listened to them talk about their new life and how divorce had liberated them. One afternoon, the 3 of us met for coffee. It was one of those meetings where everything seems normal until suddenly something someone says completely changes the direction of the conversation. I remember we were in a quiet cafe near the park where we used to walk after class. We'd been talking for hours about unimportant things until Lonnie, without warning, said, "Sometimes I think marriage is a trap." Leah let out a soft laugh as if she'd been expecting that comment. Totally. They make you believe getting married is every woman's dream, but then you realize it's a cage with flowers, she replied, stirring her cup with a spoon. I frowned. I didn't know if they were serious or not. A trap. I don't think so. I mean, it depends on who you marry, don't I? Lonnie looked at me, resting her elbow on the table. Irina, you've always been lucky. Marcel is a good guy, no one doubts that. But still, marriage changes people, and not always for the better. I don't know, I said, shrugging. I guess it's normal for them to change. We all do. Leah chimed in with that tone she used when she wanted us to listen carefully. I thought the same as you, that if I chose well, everything would be perfect. I got married convinced I'd found my soulmate. But over time you realize routine kills the magic. She took a sip of her coffee and added, "One day you wake up and you don't know if you love or you're just used to someone's presence." That phrase stuck with me. Lonnie nodded. Exactly. And when you decide to break free from that, you realize how free you feel. You don't have to account for anyone. You don't have to put up with arguments over silly things or pretend you care about what the other wants for dinner. You just do what you want when you want. But, I said a little uncomfortably, don't you feel lonely sometimes? Leah smiled with a touch of melancholy. Of course, but I'd rather feel lonely than feel trapped. The conversation continued for hours. They talked about how liberating it was to start over. Lonnie said she'd gone back to studying and that for the first time in years she felt in control of her life. Leah said her self-esteem had improved, that she no longer needed anyone's validation. I listened to them trying not to judge, but something in me began to change. Not because I believed my marriage was a prison, but because for the first time I wondered if I was truly living for myself or to maintain a relationship. That doubt stayed with me for days. Marcel noticed something was wrong. One night, while we were having dinner, he asked me if I was okay. I told him yes, I was just tired, but deep down I knew I was lying. I started to observe him differently. Everything that used to seem sweet or funny now seemed routine. When he asked me how my day had been, it felt mechanical. When he hugged me before bed, I thought about what Lonnie had said. Routine kills the magic. I tried not to dwell on it, but my mind kept racing. What if my friends were right? What if I was just used to Marcel but didn't truly love him anymore? A couple of weeks later we met again. This time the three of us had dinner at Lee's house. There was wine, music, and a dangerously trusting atmosphere. Irina, have you ever wondered if you'd be happier alone? Lonnie asked with that smile that mixed curiosity and complicity. I don't know, I replied a little nervously. I have no reason to doubt Marcel. It's not about having reasons, Leah said. Sometimes it's just about feeling alive again. Lonnie leaned towards me. Think about this. What would you do if tomorrow you woke up and didn't have to think about anyone but yourself? No shared schedules, no arguing over who washes the dishes, no having to report if you go out or come home late. Just you, your decisions, your space. For a moment I imagined that scene. Me alone in an apartment, decorating it to my liking, no commitments, no dependence on anyone. The idea caused me a mix of curiosity and fear. I don't know if that's freedom or loneliness, I said softly. Leah sighed. Sometimes you need to lose something to understand what you truly want. That night, when I returned home, Marcel was asleep. He looked peaceful, his face relaxed. I watched him for a few minutes and a guilt I couldn't explain washed over me. I hadn't done anything wrong, but something inside me was no longer the same. Over the months, conversations with my friends began to change tone. We no longer talked so much about work, trips, or movies, but about marriage and divorce. It was as if little by little each meeting turned into a group therapy session where the message was always the same. Marriage is a prison and divorce is freedom. Lonnie repeated that her ex had made her feel like a shadow of herself. Leah said that marriage was an obsolete institution invented to control women, and although I didn't completely agree with them, listening to them so sure and convinced began to sow something inside me. At first, I tried to stand firm. I said that not all marriages were the same, that every relationship had its ups and downs, and that for me commitment was important. But as the weeks passed, I found it harder to hold those arguments. Every time I saw my friends going out, traveling, or dating new men, I felt something strange. It wasn't envy, but a kind of curiosity. They seemed so free, so carefree, while I continued with my daily routine, work, home, dinner with Marcel, sleep, and repeat the same thing the next day. I couldn't help but wonder if I was missing out on something. One night, Lonnie sent me a message. It said, "There's a party tonight at a friend's house. Come with us. It'll do good to go out a bit." At first, I didn't want to go. I had to work early the next day and wasn't in the mood. But she insisted so much that I ended up accepting. I told Marcel I was going to see my friends for a while, and he had no problem. He kissed me on the forehead and told me to be careful. The party was in a large apartment with music, dim lights, and people I didn't know. At first I felt out of place, but little by little I relaxed. Drinks came and went, and Lonnie and Leah were in their element, laughing, dancing, enjoying themselves as if they didn't have a single worry in the world. A few hours later, Lonnie arrived accompanied by a young guy. He must have been about 22, maybe less. Tall, dark hair, confident gaze. "Girls, this is Scott," she said with a smile as she took his arm. "He's a friend." He greeted us kindly with a somewhat shy smile. Lonnie didn't let go of him at any moment. They danced together, whispered things in each other's ears, and laughed like teenagers. After a while, both left. They didn't say where, but we all imagined. Leah and I were left alone at the table, and she started laughing. "How shameless, right?" she said, pouring herself another drink. "Why do you say that?" I asked, confused. Leah looked at me with an amused expression. "Don't you know who Scott is?" "No. Lonnie just said he was her friend." Leah burst out laughing. "Please, friend. That friend is a guy from the gym. The poor guy has a girlfriend, a young girl, but Lonnie has been seeing him for a couple of weeks. She says he's amazing in bed, that he doesn't get tired and has the energy of a hurricane." I stayed silent, surprised. Leah continued talking unfiltered. "I also have my collagen boy, but at least I don't brag about it," she said, laughing. "Your collagen boy?" I asked, not understanding. "Yes, that's what I call my guy. He's 24. We see each other occasionally, nothing serious, but he makes me feel alive." I laughed nervously. I didn't know if she was joking or serious. But why be with someone so young? "You probably don't even have anything to talk about." Leah let out an amused sigh. "Oh, Irina, you're too innocent. In motels, believe me, the least important thing is the topic of conversation." I blushed. "I couldn't do something like that," I said quickly. "I'm married." Leah looked at me with a mix of tenderness and mockery. "Well, yes, but your husband doesn't have to find out. Besides, I'm not talking about love or betrayal. I'm talking about releasing tension, about reminding yourself that you're still alive. Sometimes you need a break, and this would do you good." I didn't answer. That conversation hung in the air for days. I couldn't get it out of my head. I thought about how they said it so naturally, as if having a lover was part of the process of reconnecting with yourself. I told myself I would never cross that line, but deep down something was starting to falter. Months passed and the topic became recurrent. At every meeting, one of them would mention their collagen boy or a new adventure. Lonnie recounted her escapades with Scott, laughing guiltlessly, as if it were a funny anecdote. Leah talked about her young guy with such confidence that it started to seem normal to me. I tried not to get involved, to stay out of it, but my friends insisted again and again. "You have to do it, Irina," Lonnie told me. "You have no idea how good you'd feel." "I don't need that," I always replied. "That's what you think," Leah retorted. "But you're tense still. Something to wake you up would do you good." At first I took it as a joke, but over time I started to feel like they were serious. They told me it wasn't about love, but about freeing myself from monotony, that I didn't have to leave Marcel, just balance things. And although I constantly refused, something inside me was stirring. It was a mixture of curiosity, doubt, and a feeling I didn't know how to describe. One afternoon after work, I had a doctor's appointment for a flu. The doctor was young, probably about 26. Dark-haired, light-eyed, kind, and with a calm voice. I don't know how it happened, but while he was examining me, I found myself smiling more than necessary. I answered his questions in a light, almost playful tone. When he smiled back at me, I felt a strange tingle. I didn't do anything inappropriate, but as I left the office, I realized what had just happened. I had flirted with him, and the worst part was I'd liked it. I felt guilty all the way home. It was the first time I'd crossed that line mentally. I hadn't cheated on Marcel, but inside something had already changed. That feeling repeated itself at work, at the gym, in a cafe. Suddenly I noticed glances, smiles, gestures that I would have ignored before but now seemed like an invitation. And I responded subtly, but I did. Sometimes I wondered if I was just doing it to prove I could still attract someone, or if I was really starting to look for an excuse to justify something I still didn't dare to do. Marcel, meanwhile, was still the same as always, attentive, patient, trusting. He asked me how I felt, if I wanted to go out on the weekend or watch a movie. And I responded coldly, not because I didn't want him, but because something in me had been contaminated. It hurt to admit it, but I started to compare. I compared his way of talking, his routine, even his way of dressing, with the energy I saw in the young guys my friends knew. I started to see Marcel as part of that monotony that Leah and Lonnie talked about so much. Every time they told me I was missing out on a lot, their voice echoed in my head. They said it was nothing, that everyone did it, that it was a way to maintain emotional balance. And I, although I kept saying I wouldn't do it, started to think about what it would be like if I did. I'm ashamed to admit it, but there were nights when while Marcel slept beside me, my mind went to other scenarios. I imagined what it would be like to feel something new again, something different, something that had nothing to do with routine. I hadn't acted yet, but I was no longer the same. Time passed and my spontaneous flirtations became more common. At first, they were just glances or smiles, things that seemed harmless, but little by little I crossed more boundaries. I started to enjoy the feeling of someone looking at me with interest. It made me feel desired, alive, as if I had recovered something I didn't even know I had lost. I didn't tell Marcel, of course, but I did tell my friends. One afternoon, while we were drinking wine at Lonnie's house, I confessed laughing that I'd been flirting with a guy from the gym. Nothing happened, I clarified immediately. He just looked at me. I looked back and that was it. Leah burst out laughing. "Oh, Irina, you look like a saint, but deep down you're like all of us." Lonnie also laughed. "I told you. The moment comes for all of us when we stop pretending to be perfect wives." I blushed trying to downplay it. It was just a silly thing, we didn't even exchange words. "It doesn't matter," Leah said, pouring herself another drink. "The important thing is that you enjoyed it, right?" I didn't know what to answer. Lonnie chimed in with her usual confident tone. "You're doing well, friend. There's nothing wrong with flirting a little. It's a way to relax, to let go of the pressure. Believe me, it happens in all marriages, it's just that some of us admit it and others don't." "Do you really think so?" I asked insecurely. "Of course," Leah replied. "Look, marriage wears you down, and if you don't give yourself small pleasures, you end up fading out. We're not talking about love, just fun." They said it with such confidence that I ended up believing them. I started repeating to myself that it wasn't a bad thing, that as long as it didn't go beyond a few glances or words, I wasn't hurting anyone. And so little by little, I convinced myself that I wasn't betraying anyone, just letting off steam. A few weeks passed and one day, while grocery shopping, I met someone. I was in the checkout line when I noticed the guy behind me looking at me. He was young, maybe 23, dark-haired, with a confident smile and a body that made it clear he spent a lot of time at the gym. "Excuse me," he said with a smile. "Can I go ahead? I only have a bottle of water." "Of course," I replied, smiling. We started talking. He was nice, charismatic, and had that carefree way of talking that only young guys have. His name was Timothy. When I finished paying, he said goodbye with an "I hope to see you again," and I don't know why, but instead of ignoring him, I smiled. A few minutes later, as I was putting my bags in the car, I saw him leave the supermarket. He walked up to me and said, "I know this sounds bold, but can I ask for your number?" I didn't think, I just gave it to him. And that decision changed everything. We started texting at first, just casual messages. He asked me how I was, made me laugh, told me I had a pretty smile. I tried to keep things light, but the conversation became increasingly flirtatious. One day, he invited me for coffee. I hesitated a lot before accepting, but ended up saying yes. We met one afternoon in a discreet place. He was kind, funny, and made me feel special. Throughout the conversation, I realized I was doing something I shouldn't, but I couldn't stop myself. When he took my hand, I felt a mix of adrenaline and guilt, and when he kissed me, I didn't reject him. That same afternoon, we went to a motel. I didn't plan for it to happen, but it did. Afterwards, as I dressed in silence, an emptiness difficult to explain washed over me. I felt no euphoria or emotion, only an enormous weight in my chest. That night, I couldn't sleep. I cried in silence while Marcel slept beside me. I promised myself it would be the first and last time. The next day, I told my friends. I wrote them a message saying I needed to talk. We met that afternoon at Lee's house, and when I told them what I'd done, they laughed. What did I tell you? Lonnie said, laughing. In the end, we all fall. Leah hugged me with a knowing smile. Don't feel bad. The guilt goes away. It's normal at first, but then you realize it's not a big deal. I don't know if I can live with this, I told them, still trembling. You can, Leah replied. Just don't overthink it. If you do it, it's because something's missing, and it's okay to look for what makes you feel alive. And indeed, over time the guilt faded. I kept seeing Timothy. 1, 2, 3 times until it became a habit. We saw each other every week, always at the same motel. Marcel didn't suspect anything, or so I thought. But everything changed one afternoon. It was a Thursday. I was with Timothy at the motel when my phone started ringing. It was Marcel, I answered, trying to sound calm. Hi, love, I said, faking naturalness. Hi, Irina, how are you? He asked in a calm voice. Good, love. I'm with some friends. I'll be back later, I lied, trying to maintain a casual tone. Perfect, he replied. Hey, a question. Roughly, how much does a simple room cost? A friend wants to have a relaxing night with his wife. You know, the kids don't leave them alone at home. I felt my heart stop. What are you talking about, love? I asked, feigning ignorance. His voice changed completely. Do you prefer this motel, or the Mercedes you went with Timothy last week? I froze. I couldn't move or speak. I just pressed the phone against my ear. Love, it's not what you think, I finally said, my voice breaking. I think you're a whore. That's what I think, he replied coldly and hung up. I stared at the screen, trembling. Timothy asked me what was wrong, but I couldn't answer. I just told him I had to go. I left the place almost running. When I got home, there was no one. Marcel's car wasn't there, and when I walked in, I felt an indescribable emptiness. The house was almost empty. In less than 4 hours, he'd taken almost everything, his clothes, his personal belongings, even the paintings he'd hung in the living room. I cried on the floor for hours. I tried to call him, I sent him messages, but he didn't answer. I didn't understand how he'd found out or how he knew Timothy's name. I tried to find him at his parents' house, but when I knocked on the door, his mother looked at me with contempt and just said, "Go away, Irina. Don't look for him again." Days later, I received an envelope. They were the divorce papers. They didn't come with a note or a word, just his signature. The last time I saw him was when we signed the documents. He didn't say anything, just looked at me with a mix of sadness and disappointment that broke my soul. I tried to explain, but he didn't give me the opportunity. He got up, signed, and left. Since then, I haven't heard from him. None of our mutual friends wanted to talk to me. My own friends, the ones who insisted so much that it wasn't a big deal, laughed at first and then distanced themselves. Leah told me laughing that at least I had my adventure, and Lonnie just said that now she understood what it meant to lose something good. I don't talk to them anymore. In fact, I don't have many people to talk to anymore. Sometimes I wake up in the middle of the night and wonder how I got to this, how I went from having a happy marriage to sleeping alone, regretful and empty. Marcel didn't deserve what I did to him. He was a good man, a faithful partner, someone who loved me even when I no longer knew who I was. And I lost him by letting myself be influenced by those who confused freedom with selfishness. If I could go back, I'd never have listened to that advice. I'd never have sought that liberation that only chained me more. Today I know that freedom isn't in betraying or lying, but in being able to look at yourself in the mirror without feeling ashamed of what you see. And I, unfortunately, still can't.